All right, Doug's Garage, episode 2. We're going to do a little talking here. I've made up a tripod situation. Hopefully, it doesn't fall over. But we got a little something we can work on in the background here. And I'm going to go over a couple things on a little bit of theory and what we're going to replace and how it works. So, right here, you can see right here, this is what we're going to replace. This is a speed sensor. So, this is what basically does the speedometer on the dash on a car. And in this case, it's actually a four-wheeler behind me. But this is what's going to sense the rotation inside the motor, the axles and stuff, and translate all the information to the computer and print out the speed on the dash, so the miles per hour. This part here, this has nothing to do with the four-wheeler. This is just, I'm using this as a reference because it's very similar. I'm not going to be able to show you inside of the motor where this thing, the other half of this basically, and how it works, but it looks very similar to this. It's going to have a gear on a drive shaft that spins, and it's going to have low points and high points just like this gear has here, well, this pulley, but it has high points and low points, and the sensor sits like this, and obviously as the gear spins around, the way this thing works is there's a magnet in here, and what it does is in simple terms, what it's doing is it's sensing metal, and then the low spot would be like a void, so it's not sensing anything. See, this is magnetic. You can see the screwdriver sticking to it. And then as it spins, and obviously the faster it spins, the quicker it picks up a high spot, and a low spot. And then this magnet basically translates when it's getting a magnetic field, when it's sensing itself, the metal, and it translates that to the computer, and it translates it into miles per hour. Pretty simplistic thing. We are going to work on a four-wheeler, but a car works the same exact way. In fact, the sensor looks identical in a car. It sits on the wheel bearing on a car, but in this case, it sits inside of the motor. So that's what we're going to fix today. It's not so much broken as in the magnet or anything. It's actually the plug is part of the old one. We haven't taken the old one out, but the plug part here snaps off. It's pretty common on these four-wheelers that this little plug at the end of it snaps off. So that's that. And then I'm going to pause the video here. We have one other thing we're going to fix. All right. So the other thing I need to fix, and as silly as it is, it's just the four-wheel is missing a nut on the exhaust, but I figure it's a good time to explain different types of nuts, different types of fasteners here. So this one here is nothing more than just a regular basic nut. And then all these ones over here, and this is just 4 examples, there's many others out there, but these are all lock style nuts. So they have some type of form built into the nut that locks the nut onto whatever it's fastening so that it won't come undone. This style here is got the little pieces of metal right here. You can see the 3 small pieces of metal. And those 3 pieces of metal are offset from the threads inside, so it'll bite down onto the bolt. This one here, I don't know if you can see, but it has little teeth all around the edge here. Same idea. As you tighten this up, those will grab into the metal and kind of deform the metal, like the sheet metal or whatever it's tightening up against. It'll deform it a little bit, and when it tries to go back out, there'll be ridges in the metal that it's up against, and it won't back itself out. This one here is got sort of like the first one built into it. If you can kind of see the difference in colors here, there's a piece of nylon in there. Now when this one's used, but when they're brand new, I mean, it kind of looks straight. The nylon is a little bit bigger. You can kind of see it's a little bit bigger than the threads. And when you tighten it up, it basically as it tightens up and the bolt comes out through here and hits the nylon, it cuts into the nylon and makes its own threads. And because it's a little bit smaller than the threads and it made fresh threads as you threaded it on, it won't come off either. And this one here, as you can see, the little slits that are cut in it all around, is kind of the same idea as the nylon one, except for the threads are already all the way threaded up to the top there. And let's see if we can kind of see the tapering on the edges here. So basically after they make this nut, they make all these cuts in here, and then this part here gets put into a press and it squeezes in on the nut, making it so that the threads are a little bit tighter than at the bottom here where you start to thread it on. So like if you were to thread this on, it would be real easy until the bolt started hitting about right here where the cuts are. So those are just 4 different examples of basic lock nuts. And then over here you have a lock washer. You can see the washer's cut. And this works very similar to this one here, where it has the little teeth cut into it. As you tighten this up, the washer itself will flatten out, but as it flattens out, it'll bite into the metal, just like this one does, and create a ridge so that it won't be able to come off. Those are your basic nuts. So on the four-wheeler, we have a missing nut, and I just thought it would be a good time to explain the different types of fasteners. Unfortunately, because of what we're going through, I can't exactly get the exact nut I want, but we're going to use a lock washer and just a regular nut. If I had something like this in the right thread pitch, I would have used that, but I don't have it, and I don't think it's really worth going to the hardware store to pick up one single nut for this, and this will work fine. Might have to eventually replace it again when it falls off, but it'll work for now. All right, so here's the four-wheeler, and take a quick look here. You have it sideways. One of the things about working on cars or four-wheelers in this case, or anything else, is there's a lot of problem solving. So right down here, right here, is the sensor, and what you're looking at is the side of the motor with the clutches, but behind that this whole black thing here is the actual motor. You can see up in there's a cylinder. But that sensor sits on the bottom of the motor. And behind the sensor is the oil for the motor. And the reason why we have it sitting like this, sideways, is because the oil was just changed in this thing. And we don't really want to change the oil again. So if we had the four-wheeler sitting level on the floor and we pulled this sensor out, well, guess what? All the oil is going to come out of the crankcase because that sensor is sitting right on the bottom of the motor. And right behind the sensor is the crankcase with the oil. So a little bit of problem solving instead of having to drain the oil and put new oil in it. Or, we could have unbolted this and did a quick switcheroo job, pulled it out and shoved the new one in real quick, and maybe there wouldn't be any oil coming out. And, we could have done that, but why not get a little creative? Which, working on stuff, sometimes you have to be creative. Just like in the first video, how I showed you about ratchets and all the different extensions and whatnot. You got to be creative. So let's get creative, and I figured, why not try and put the four-wheeler up on an angle? And the idea would be to put all the oil to one side of the motor. So I'm trying to see if I can get this thing to sit still without doing anything. But try to put all the oil to one side of the motor, so when we pull the sensor out, all the oil stays in the motor. Make it so it's nice and neat, clean, easy. You don't have to replace the oil, and you don't have to make a mess. So let's see if we can do this. Yeah, I already loosened the bolt. I hit the ratchet. So I'm going to pull the bolt out. Grab the bolt. And the sensor, a little twist on the sensor and pull it out of here. Oh, look at that. No oil coming out. So, take a look at this old sensor. See all the oil on it? See how it's got an O-ring here? So that's what seals this sensor up to the case, and none of the oil actually comes out of the case. So before we put the new one in, I already did it. I put a little bit of grease on there. Well, I used lithium grease or something, or in a spray can, because you want to lube up this little seal. It's a little rubber O-ring. If you don't, and you go to shove this thing in here, the O-ring could bind up, twist, maybe pop out of this thing and not actually seat itself right, and then it would leak oil. We don't want that. So pop this in here, and let me get it in there, get it lined up on the bottom of the bolt. I'm going to go finger tight first, because there's only one bolt on this thing. We want to make sure we push up. So I'm pushing up with my thumb so that this thing goes in nice and flush. You don't want it to go in crooked, because that would be another way that the thing would not seal the O-ring. Grab the ratchet. This thing doesn't need to be super tight, but hand tight basically. And then we get the plug right here. Plug it back in. We have all crap out of there? I think so, yeah. Another thing when it comes to working on stuff, you're always shoving your hands in awkward ways and places. So that's really it. Not much to this job, but hopefully maybe you learned a little bit about how that sensor works and how it has something that seals it, and then the whole problem solving idea of keeping the oil inside the motor while we work on it. And that's why we put it up on an angle like this, and it worked out really good. Didn't have any oil anywhere, nothing on the floor, nothing on the four-wheeler. I don't have to replace any oil. Alright, so pause this. I'm going to put the thing down flat, and we're going to try to figure out how to get the nut in there, and maybe use a little combination of different sockets to get the nut that's in the back here. Way inside of here, we're going to replace a nut. Alright. So, I take the tire off so I can get in here easily, but here's where I think I have the right nut. Don't have a lock washer though. I don't have the right size. So you have to bear with me because I'm doing this one-handed. So, 1/4-inch ratchet with a big long extension with a universal joint socket because of the tight axis. You could usually probably use a straight one, but I figure why not. I'll show you how a universal joint can work. So you see how the extension is going up to the right, top right, but the socket is off to the side there. Actually not bad. I'll tighten this up. Might as well check the bottom on here too, because that one's tight. I think I know why it fell off, because I had the motor out of this thing a year ago. It's not very easy to get at that thing and tighten it up. Alright, well, I mean, it's pretty simple, but it was more like a way to show you how to use something like that with the universal style socket on the end. And it wasn't really 100% necessary, but why not, right? And that's it. This thing's ready to go back to the customer. It should have been washed before it was brought here, but sometimes customers don't do that. All right, so quick little review of what we just did. So we replaced the speed sensor, where you learn that the O-ring on a sensor that seals, you need to lube that up before you put it in, because you could potentially roll the O-ring or the seal out of place and not really seal up the way it's meant to. We learned how this works, basic simple way that it works with that little pulley that I had to show you. That there's a magnet in here, and the magnet senses the high spots on the pulley, so the spots are all evenly spaced out. So as it goes faster, it picks up the high spots quicker, and it all translates to the computer and reads out your miles per hour on the dash. We got to play with a ratchet with a long extension and a universal joint on the end to get in a tight spot. And you guys probably laughed as I held the camera with one hand and tried to shove myself in there and figure out how to get that bolt on and videotape at the same time. And we went over a bunch of different style lock nuts. The nylon style one, this style with the cuts in it and it crimped over, the style here with the little teeth on the backing plate, the style with the little metal on the inside teeth, a lock washer. I wish I had a lock washer the right size for that exhaust so we could put that on, but I didn't. And then basically your regular old nut. Yeah, so that's that. We went over problem solving how to make sure none of the oil fell out when we took the sensor out. So we had the four-wheeler sideways on a set of jacks, and it worked really well. None of the oil came out, which was nice. Yeah, that's that. I think my next video, I have my own truck needs some exhaust work. So I think the next video we're going to be in a different garage. We'll be up in my buddy Tom's garage. So he's got a lift, so I'll go over how you put a car in a lift, and we're going to cut out a piece of the exhaust, and we're just going to weld in a new piece just to make it work for now.